in the recovery room, and Dr. Whittington, it's like all he could say is,
your baby's really sick.
Your baby's really sick. He wouldn't say anything other than that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have to get him to the NICU. We're going to care flight him. So they've called their plane, and it just somehow in that time she goes to a normal recovery room, and they're prepping him, and they put him in this huge incubator thing that they're going to care flight him. And that's when the first time she sees him is in this incubator, and it doesn't look good. And they wheel him in for us to say goodbye. And that's when we decide, okay, I'm going to go and you're going to stay here.
We'll sing until the miracle comes.
They call me in, and it's those words none of us want to hear. Mr. Sheriff, would you please sit down? And the neurologist had the whole conversation. And he's a very kind, gracious man, very clinical. So he's not cold or mean, but he's just raw data, almost no emotion. And he said, well, your son had a major insult on delivery and was without oxygen for a significant period of time. And that means brain damage, and it's most likely cerebral palsy. And he had seizures, and there's a lot about this that we don't know. There's a lot that every kid handles is different, but most of the cases he might not be able to walk or talk. We have a feeding tube in him. We don't know. He may not be able to feed himself. And because those seizures, we don't know if those will be permanent. I put him on these kind of medications. But those, you just need to prepare for that, for everything to change in your life.
He's painting a picture in your mind of like, this is not the picture that you guys had cultivated up to this point of what it means to raise your fifth kid. Like this is like life altering, like imagery of like, oh, okay, our entire world might change.
And he's
instead of bringing a baby home at the end of the day, we've been introduced to a different life altogether.
He's very clear. This is a prognosis, not a diagnosis, meaning this is most probable. He said there are very few outliers that can make a near full or full recovery, but it's very, very rare. You should prepare for most cases, which are he's cerebral palsy, and that's going to change. It's most likely that change is going to happen in your life because of that. And they just let it set, because I know that the time he's a pediatric neurologist. He doesn't monitor healthy children. He looks at all the neurological cases. So they're prepared for these kinds of conversations. I'm sure all sorts of belligerent parents. It's a grieving process. I felt it all in that moment, but I've been for a long time working on gratitude, and I knew that for my own sake and for their sake, we're partners in this. That's when, and I've told this numerous times. I mean, it was a really important moment. I could just feel the emotions coming up, but I just said, thank you very much for what you're doing for my son. I know you're taking care of him the best you know how, and I don't know, there's so much about this is specialized that I don't know how to do any of this. So please always be truthful with me. Tell me what you see in the facts. Don't be afraid to tell me what you see. I know that many people probably handle that different, so I don't want you to ever be nervous or afraid of telling me what you see. But you need to know that my wife and I were people of faith, and we got a lot of people praying for this kid. And I think my son's going to surprise you.
Yeah.
And he just said, I hope so. So we were right by my son's bed. So I just reached out, touched him, prayed for him pretty quietly. And I started walking to the room, and man, it just, these kinds of moments have like a disproportionate effect on your life, because of just like the extreme emotions. But I just, as I was walking, like inside my head, their words We're just like screeching at a distorted volume. And with it, like a machine gun of images of what that's going to look like, and what it's going to look like for our family, and what it's going to look like for our other kids, and what it's going to look like for our home, and what it's going to look like for our future. And just like all those, just like in an instant, it was like those words were screaming and those images were just flashing. It was very overwhelming. And I was having a hard time keeping it together to get all the way to the room. Because I'd also been working on not suppressing emotion. I was pretty good at it, but it's not healthy to suppress emotion. So I'm trying not to be controlled by emotion, but know how to process it. And so I'm just trying to keep it together to get to the room. And somewhere in that walk is where like it just like thundered in a silence all at once, and just a clear word from the Lord: only believe. And it just went quiet. I made it to the room, and I mean, just to be honest, I just collapsed on the floor. And I let I was by myself, so I just let the emotions flow. And then when I could get myself a little bit together, I knew she's going to need to know, but I don't want her. She cannot come until tomorrow. Her having this information will do nothing for the next day. I will tell her in the morning, but I need someone to know this. And so I called my dad. And I struggled to get the words out, still pretty emotional about it. And he said, okay, well, we're going to pray. We're going to stand, and we're going to believe. It was just a rough night. The emotions, and I was like, but I know I've got to sleep. I've just got to rest. I can't be ready to stand by myself. I can't be ready to stand and be with people until I've just fully resolved this before the Lord. And so I went to bed just really meditating on Mark 5, the story that comes from, just Jairus' daughter and Jairus' faith, and Jesus, only believe, only believe, only believe. And just having that kind of resolution in my heart, and then going to sleep, taking a shower, and just feeling that, knowing I need to reset, taking a shower, and I went to sleep. Well, after that, the nurses had rotated, and a new nurse had come. And again, this is only 24-ish hours in. And I'd met the nurse the night before, I'd met the nurse that day. Well, a new nurse had stepped in. Her name's Latricia. And it's sometime in the night, he had opened his eyes, which I don't know if that's common in the cooling treatment or if it's just, I don't know what it was, but she knew I needed to see good signs. So anything, good signs. And so she called me, and I get the call, but it's midnight, 1 a.m. I've already been asleep 3 or 4 hours. And so I come out of a dead sleep, answer, and it's like, it's just like gibberish to me inside my head. I don't even really remember it. And I'm like, okay. And I hung up and went back to sleep. And she was upset. She called me again, and I must have answered and said, okay, I'm coming, and went back to sleep. Finally, I'm hearing this beating on my door. And so I like come to, and I open the door, and she's like, you have to come now. I'm like, so I have not met this lady.
Yeah.
But I know that they're not going to get me for nothing. So like, you have to come. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming. And she like puts her hand over the door and is like, now, you're coming now. And so I get my shoes on, and when you come in, you have to wash your hands. So I'm like,
it's a process.
asleep.
You got to, you have to be clean. You
to go in there.
Yeah.
And so I get in there, and by the time I get there, she's like, oh, his eyes were open. And I wanted you so bad to see his eyes open. And his eyes had closed, and disappointment. And I'm like, it really is okay. Just don't call me. I'm not gonna
just come get me.
Come get me. I'm okay. You waking me up and coming and get me. And and so she's like, well, let me just at least give you a moment with him. So she shut the curtains, sits outside the curtains, and I'm just there by myself with him. And I'd gone to sleep with that resolve. And I'm looking at my son, and we show the pictures. It's like everything you see is bad. There's tubes everywhere. He's cold. Like, it's weird to feel your baby and his body temperature is cold. It's down 3 or 4 degrees. So he's cold. He's stiff because he's been seized up. So his legs and his arms are stiff and kind of frozen. And he's not cognizant. So I put my hands on his little body. And I don't even remember what I prayed. I just know it was not dramatic. It was not even super emotional. I'm sure I had some feeling in that moment. I just remember praying. I don't even remember what I prayed. I just rebuked the seizures. And like, I didn't know. I hadn't well thought out like how I'm praying. I just had that like resolve, the same resolve that I remember looking at the nurse, like, you're not going to let him go. I need you to resuscitate him. I felt that same internal resolve. I'm only going to believe. I'm going to trust God. And I remember trying to nurture different images of him fully healthy in that moment. And then later just practicing like, no, I'm going to see him walking. I'm going to see him running. Nurture the images of him on a bicycle. Nurture images of him in kindergarten and graduating kindergarten. And then fast forwarding that all the way through his life, seeing him play with his siblings, seeing him play basketball or any other sport. I mean, I imagined a bunch of sports. Seeing him graduate 8th grade and going through high school, graduating college, getting married, like being there in his wedding, like all of those things that would mark the manifestation of God's will in his life. Just nurturing that and like letting that be the fuel of faith. We're going to stand. I know we've got, at that time, it was just private. So it's just our family and just a couple people, the elders, maybe some of the pastors. Seth was preaching that weekend and let the congregation know. Mm-hmm. And it was just letting them know on the Saturday night service. And so I went back to bed and just had that, like, I'm just going to be resolved. Next morning, I got up, took a shower. I had a really emotional moment in the shower, but it was different than the night before. It wasn't sorrow, like, I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't like an emotional reaction to the possibility of him, like what he went through. It was like, I don't know how to say this. It was like sorrow that he's having to go through this. And I just remember being in the shower, just weeping, like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And so I got up, saw him, and that's when I called Hannah, who I don't even remember how much we talked the day before, but that's when I said, this is what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be here tonight, and they're going to try to say it again. Here's how we're going to handle this. We're going to be okay. We're going to be resolved. We're going to trust God. And they might say even worse things, but like whatever they say, we're going to be grateful, and we're going to tell them he's going to surprise you, and we're going to believe. That's when you should probably take over the story.
Yeah, because you're back in Durant still at this point, and I actually remember you getting a call because I was there at the hospital visiting you with our siblings and our mom, and I remember you obviously being emotional after the call, because this is if this is the same call that I'm remembering, then it's like, it's the first time you're getting any inkling of some of those things. And so what do you remember about that? Because I remember us being there just trying to be supportive and encouraging and trying to to be positive, but us really not having much information. Nothing to really go off of.
That day that he left, I remember we weren't really getting a lot of information. They were just ensuring that that I was going to make it through. So their focus there at the hospital was ensuring that I was getting better. I think that's when I remember them telling me what I had experienced was a placenta abruption. Didn't know the risk of those things, but they were surprised with how I didn't have to have blood transfusions or anything like that, which is so funny, but this isn't funny, but in the emergency situation, that's the only form that I ended up signing was the blood transfusions. So that was a win. They were excited about that I was doing well. And the first night I was there, this lady, I don't remember her name, but she was my nurse, and I felt like she was like an angel because she had nothing but good things to say. And I almost felt like the time I was in the hospital while he was there was like getting me ready for what I was about to walk into. Like there was a sense where I was being protected with positivity, protected with hope and encouragement and support. Because come Sunday morning, which is the one you're talking about, when Jacob called me, and oh my gosh, like the word that just kept ringing in my ears was seizures. That Urias has had seizures, and they don't know if he's gonna recover. I mean, they don't know anything. And Jacob does not get emotional, does not cry ever. And this is probably the second time in our whole marriage that I had heard him weak in the way he was communicating. Like he was,
you could hear the emotion in
I
his
could hear
voice,
the emotion in his voice. Yeah. And so, man, I recall closing my eyes and I didn't have any words. It was like I had been experiencing this peace and this hope and this, like, that was not the call that I expected as much as I probably should have. I just really almost had this, like, it's all going to be okay. It's all going to turn out okay. We're just going to see it instantly. So that was kind of like the wall moment of like, yeah, this is not going to be easy. And I don't even know what to do. I think I even remember telling myself, can't things just return to normal again? Like I just had this, God, just bring my kids back. I want everybody together. This is not the way this is supposed to look like, especially going through this after going through it the way you want to 4 times. I just remember this longing for like, can we just rewind and restart? You know, like you just
wake up from this bad dream.
Yes, you just kind of like start reasoning with your circumstances. Like even the room I was in was the room I was in with nearly every kid that I had at that hospital. So I'm a big memories person. So I was like, this is not the way it's supposed to look. The baby's not even here. I'm here. We're all scattered.
Excuse me, Lord, this is not going to plan.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I remember those internal thoughts. And that was probably my like battle. I was like, no, this isn't what it's supposed to look like. Can we fix this? And just wanting that instant like resolve. And so I closed my eyes. I must have shared it with our mom because she's the one that stayed there with me the whole time I was there at the hospital. And I have no idea how long this was. But no joke, when I opened my eyes, every one of my siblings were surrounding my bed. And man, it was still emotional for me. It was this moment of like feeling like I couldn't get up and fight anymore. Like I physically was unable to even get out of bed. I mean, they wanted me to walk. And just because of the surgery I had gone through, I couldn't even, like the pain was unbearable. And they're wanting me to get up and walk. And I think it just visually for me was like, I can't do anything. All these thoughts of, can things just return to normal? Can you just bring everybody, like, this isn't the way the story's supposed to go. In that moment, it's like God surrounded me with people, like visually, that they're going to go to battle for me and with me. And you know what? No matter how long this battle is, no matter how long we're in the middle of this, like I have this confidence that I'm not alone. It was just that visual sign of like, I'm not going at this alone. And even if it was like whatever the outcome looked like. And I think in that time, we had made the decision, and maybe from that phone call, like, do we invite the church in to pray with us? Those kinds of questions start coming. I mean, for up to this point, other than Pastor Seth saying we need to pray for Hannah and the baby, that was all they knew. Right. And we hadn't really, we hadn't contemplated what to do. So I remember something about that kind of came into the radar. And because I remember other teammates showing up maybe there in Durant as well. But like he said, we weren't really sure what we were going to be praying for totally. And so at that point, the reality of what the Lord had even shared with me that day in the operating room, the reality of this whole season that I had kind of been in and out of was like right there in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the battlefield was there, and this was not the time to back down, but we're going to go forward. And so throughout that day, I got released. I don't know how, because I was hurting so bad, but I got released, and I came down to the NICU, and whole new territory, whole new experience, not what you want to experience. But I saw Jacob, and we went into the room where Urias was, and the nurse at the time, she just had this real like face that I wanted to smile, but she was not smiling. And I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, like this isn't sinking in. Like, this is really bad. And for some reason, I'm just hoping it's just going to change, you know? And I remember looking at Urias, and I just said to him, there's only one name that's bigger than all the names that you're facing. And that name is Jesus. That's all I said. And I looked at the nurse, and I just wasn't weird. I just said, anytime you're talking to him, tell him that. Because we weren't, at the time, we weren't able just to sit back there with them because of all the monitoring.
And in the cooling treatment, you're supposed to have minimal physical contact because the hope of that cooling treatment is that it mirrors being in the womb. And so we weren't allowed to pick him up. All we could do when we touch him is like touch the top of his head and kind of how his knees had curled up. That's all we could really touch him. We really couldn't even put our hands on him as much as just like touch him. And that doesn't need to be too much.
Yeah. So that was my first time to see him outside of that tank. And the neurologist would have come in that time, and he shared with me everything Jacob had already shared.
Yeah,
and
we had another sit down.
Yeah. And he shared, all the obstacles, all the things. And I think it just started sinking in. Yeah. Like, this is the battle we're really in.
You don't know how long you're going to be there. But,
right.
I mean, you guys end up being there how long?
20 days.
20 days.
So the next threshold was going to be when they heated him back up, which would have been 72 hours later.
Yeah.
And so we would have been on, this was Sunday when she came. So Tuesday, is it Tuesday night or Monday night? Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So Monday night, they were going to heat him back up. And so this is Sunday. So they're not going to say much because they don't know. All they know are the prognosis that like the what usually happens and the things that they see in him that mirror what has usually happened. But they don't know anything. So a lot of it
was just like waiting to see.
So the reheating him was critical because that's when all of his systems are going to be coming back online. And is his brain going to overreact and those seizures kick back in? That would then tell them what the next set of the journey is. So they were very minimal on what they would tell us. And the neurologist, who's the most qualified person to talk about him, even the neonatologist, only knows general things that require a specialist. Yeah. He's the one that could give us, this is everything I see.
So in the middle of this waiting, I think, if I recall correctly, like you do bring in the church and tell them what to pray.
So Sunday after we had the conversation with the neurologist, and so she got to hear it, and that's when I was more resolved than I was the night before. And I knew that could come when it comes from the doctor. It could come as a blow. So we talked and we got through that. And then I was raised as pastor's kid that most of our life is very public. So like when it comes to personal matters, keep it private. That's just the general framework of how I was raised. And it's mostly wisdom. And part of it is because my dad dealt with a lot of really dumb people saying really dumb things. Right. And so we were talking through like, what do we do here? Like there was a group had been made just so that there was something, and a very general, almost like public statement was there. And so there was already something public. And my dad was like, you need to call that back. Like, this is a family matter. Are you sure you're thinking? And so remember, this was in the lobby, in the waiting room. He had pulled me aside and was like, what are we going to do here? And I said, Dad, Like, you spent 30 years teaching them to pray. Like, if now's not the moment, when is?
Right.
If you've taught them to pray, then we need people to pray. And he's like, okay, well then we're going to have to write a prayer to make sure they're praying the right thing. I said, all right, leave that to me. And so we decided to go public with it and be full disclosure. And it was kind of in line with just like, I'm only going to believe. And I did not have a high tolerance for stupid people saying stupid things. But to be honest, I don't think hardly anybody said anything really stupid.
Right.
And it's because I was really very controlling on like what you're going to pray. So I remember going, a couple had graciously put us in a hotel and like just put their credit card on file and said, as long as it takes for y'all to stay here, stay here. And it was maybe a 2-minute drive from the hospital. And so our kids had been kind of dispersed to different families. And that's where you guys as like siblings, like really cared for our kids.
We had a few of the crew for those first few days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we had Israel and Olivia and maybe Emma.
Yeah. And at the time, I mean, our oldest was 7. So
Yeah, Emma was 2.
Yeah.
barely 2.
So I remember
just turned 2.
I remember specifically like with Emma, it was so precious. Like she was like, yeah, I'm here, but I'm not staying the night. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you don't have to stay the night. You don't have to stay the night. You just rest.
Yeah.
And I just let her believe. Oh yeah, that's cool, but I'm not staying the night. Like staying the night's like that's too extreme.
She spent a lot of time with my parents in that time.
We were, because 2 of them were in school. One I think, joined preschool those weeks. And then Emma was too young to go to school. So y'all wrote that prayer.
So that night,
you wrote the prayer.
Yeah, my dad was like, we need to write it. And I'm like,
I will write it.
I'm on it. And so we went back to the hotel. And
I actually stayed. I remember staying one night at my parents' house because in that moment,
that night you went back because I don't think we'd secured the hotel room.
That's what it was. Right. So I had to go back. He stayed at the hospital and
I mean, because you're still recovering.
Yeah. And I really think even in hindsight, looking back at it, like I was not all cognizant of things that he really was. Because I remember going back and like just having almost like more experiences with the Lord in that room I was sleeping in of just like, and it was, we exchanged stories later, but it was the same scripture, only believe. Be it unto me according to your word was really, I don't remember where that's found, but anyway, Luke 1. Yeah. So yeah. And then I come the next day and I think we're waiting on the cooling treatment.
Yeah. So I write the prayer, send that out.
Yeah.
And Monday night is when they're going to heat them up. And we know that's a critical time. Well, in the NICU, only immediate family can come outside of the parents and only one at a time. And I think we were able to negotiate like both of my parents, both of y'all's parents coming in. But like, thankfully, all my friends are pastors. So like different people would come in like, yeah, he's a pastor. Yeah, he's a pastor. And so we were able to kind of cheat the system a little bit. But since nobody was allowed in, what they do is they set up a camera over just the top and allow you to stream it. And since the waiting room was pretty empty, I'm like, I took over the TV. And so I hooked up my laptop or my iPad, I can't remember, and I hooked it to the TV so everybody that came could see him. Well, Hannah had arranged for some people to come down and pray while they're heating him back up, because that is definitely the most critical moment up to this point. And so I was just overwhelmed with such a blessing that almost the whole team came down, my team that I've been working with, y'all's parents, my parents. One of my favorite pictures that we have of this whole thing is in that prayer. Our sweet little Emma has got her arms crossed and she's praying. And she's just 2. But we prayed and had worship for like 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, just praying and trusting and believing, and just speaking the word over him. It started, I think it was like 7 or 8 o'clock, and most people were there till like 10 or 11. Well, because of how critical this was, we had planned to stay in the lobby all night. And this is where, man, I know there were so many people fighting with us, like y'all taking care of our kids. So like this isn't to elevate one or the other, but Seth and Kim and Mike and Christy and Tom and Misty slept in that waiting room with us. We're there all night, and we were watching. And I need to look at the timestamps on the images, so I might get the times slightly wrong, and I'll make sure that we have these images. We're looking for good signs, and we don't know what good signs are. But one of them was, if he's in seizure mode, he's going to stay stiffed up like this. And it was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember that Janelle had set up a 24-hour prayer for us, to where different people would take 1 hour slots praying. And she or someone had like these late night times as this was happening, and they end up having this vision at the same time. But at like 1 a.m. or something, maybe midnight, one arm relaxes, which is a huge sign. And then like an hour or two later, another arm relaxes, and him relaxing is like, it was a big deal. It's like 3 or 4 in the morning. We're like celebrating and freaking out, but we just slept there in the waiting room, and they all slept there in the waiting room next to us. And the next day is when, after a few hours after that, because the whole reheating process, I think, is like 12 hours, because they have to do it extremely incrementally. And they run a couple tests, and that was probably one of the bigger moments. Was after reheating him, they did all these EAG tests. It's the one about the brain. And the doctor, who I don't remember him being because they're on like 12-hour rotations. I think this was like his first round. Like, I don't know if I remember him before this, but he came out and like pulled us aside, and like, this is like the like hold your breath kind of moments. And do you remember how he said it? All I remember is because of the spike emotion, I don't really remember all that he said, but he basically just said there were no seizures, and this is a really good sign. We're really hopeful. And that was kind of like the first kind of relief. And he was clear. This does not mean we're out of the woods. Does not mean everything's fine. It just means this is a really good sign.
Right.
I think he also told us in that time that they would, in a few days from now, do an MRI. So that was kind of like good news, and then we were hopeful as to. So it was able to help us direct our
so things are
prayers.
looking good.
In a lot of ways, y'all have been holding your breath this whole time.
Yes.
And this is the first little like sign of good news.
And so like that builds my faith. We're not just relieved, but like, okay, this is up and to the right. Like we are seeing that not only they see good signs, they're going to see more good signs. And it's another waiting game. And so we're posting stuff, good news, and excited with our family, and celebrating. And then the night before the MRI, we have another couple hours of worship and prayer and speaking this. So like, we're really encouraged, very hopeful. And on day 7, so this is the next Friday, they have the MRI, and this is the first time we get to hold him. So they take him out of the bed, and we can hold him, and that's when we're speaking over him, and they put him in a cart, and we take him back to the MRI. And this is like pretty early in the morning. So we're excited. Like, it's a little unnerving, but like, we're really excited. They do the MRI. Things were great in the MRI, and they take him back. And so now we're just like, okay, we're waiting for the results from the neurologist. And he comes in.
I remember Pastor Lee had come to the lobby, and if anybody has walked through medical tribulation with their kids, he was the perfect person, to be there.
Ginger,
because in that moment, like, we didn't get the news we had hoped for.
So the neurologist comes in, he pulls out the sheets, and he said, it's good, but this is what I see. This part of his brain and this part of his brain, there's affection here. Like, he's been affected, and it is in the areas that could be cerebral palsy.
Developmental delays.
It
was the bridge of your brain that communicates.
It's like, there are good signs I see, but I do see that this is very clear. There's more, and that was like a baseball bat to the stomach.
Right.
and Lee and Ginger were there, and they just so happened to have come
Showed
that
up.
day
Yeah.
in that moment, and we shed some tears and spent some time in prayer with them, and they were just the perfect ones to just be like, it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to make it. It's going to be okay. And I remember, like, I don't know if I'm ready to tell everybody yet. And I just said, I need to sleep. Like, I need to rest. Cause it took the wind out of me. And I can't remember if we both went to the hotel or if you were just going to stay,
Well,
but I knew I needed to go take a nap. This was late in the day, 4 or 5 o'clock, I think, maybe 3. I just needed to go
you guys
sleep.
didn't know you were signing up for a marathon.
No,
Yeah.
Up to this point.
So you're
like,
almost sprinting and then you tire yourself out.
Yeah.
And then you're sprinting and it's emotional and it's it's all of that. But the moment is a little foggy for me, but I do remember it was either night before the MRI or as we took that nap. I had this dream, and in the dream, the dream doesn't necessarily matter as much as, like, I heard the Lord just tell me, Hannah, be patient in the process and watch me get all the glory. And I remember that kind of just carrying through that, like, that idea of the marathon that we didn't know we had signed up for. It was this enough for me to say, like, okay, no matter how long this takes, if this takes 10 years, if this takes, I mean, it was like I was trying to put out as far as I could imagine, having the endurance to run, that we're gonna walk through the process and God's gonna get the glory. I don't know what that looks like, but so that was something I was hanging on to, but it was a blow and it wasn't what we hoped for.
And so this is a week after?
This is a weekend.
Yeah.
And we had been posting encouragement.
Yeah,
Good news.
Good news. And this was bad news. Yeah.
This is bad news. I don't know how to talk about this yet.
Yeah.
So we took a nap. I slept probably a few hours because I remember it being dark. And I walked over to Starbucks that was somewhere around close. It was before closing. And that's when I sat down with the laptop or whatever I had and, like, really had to think through. We made a commitment to be honest. And I have to be honest about this. I just remember being honest, but that was when, like, nope, we've got this resolve. We're going to only believe. I'm going to trust God. We're going to keep praying this prayer and we're going to see it. We're going to see it through. And so that made it to where we had to, like, be more patient. There's a couple, I mean, in that 20 days, there's a couple more key moments, but about 2 weeks in, well, we were seeing good signs and then we start looking at after day 7 and we go through that and then they're watching and we're going through day after day. I can't remember how many days in is when, like, day 8, 9 is when we're like, okay, now how much like what does it take to get out of here? Like, we need a change of environment now. What are the things that are important for him to get out of here? And one of them was him being able to eat, him being able to feed, because he was having a feeding tube. And Hannah had been pumping, which breastfed all of our kids. And so this was already a big change, and been pumping. And so him getting a bottle was a huge deal. And I don't know how many days in, basically, him taking the bottle, he started aspirating.
They started introducing the idea that we would have to be equipped to take him home, and we had to learn these things. We had to go through these different classes. CPR was one of those things, and even learning feeding tubes and, like, all of that. So this second week felt more like a week of education of, like, in order to prepare you for what's ahead, you've got to learn all this stuff. And so they started telling us that what do they call him? The therapist, the eating special. I don't remember what it was called, but this specific person,
basically,
she was a feeding specialist.
A feeding specialist that teaches you how to bottle feed in unique cases. Yeah.
So because what they were concerned about was that his suck and swallow muscles weren't there because of all that had happened to him,
and the potential. They're treating him as if there is brain damage.
Yeah. So if he doesn't have that strength there, then that goes straight to your lungs, and then
it could be more traumatic
and worse. And so they're not seeing him be strong.
One of the first signs they're looking for is the heart-lung connection. Like, those are the most important organs to be functioning. And so they were really watching anything that affects the heart and lungs, because they had extubated him a little before the MRI. So they had to where he was breathing. So they were really good news about that. But now feeding, this has to still be solid and it cannot be affected.
And certain things they were seeing about him was that, like in normal cases with a newborn, certain ways they hold their head or are able to maneuver their body show that they have the muscle for all that's needed. Well, because of the insult, as they called it, he didn't have muscle tone the way that you should at that point. And so that was the next big hurdle, was being educated, but also like learning a new way to feed him. You know, they would not in any way allow like him to try to nurse or anything. And that was kind of like the goal in mind was, could we get there? And they said, before we can do that, that is not something he's even ready for. So that was hard because.
And then we're like, just let him try. Like, come on,
we
man.
Even, I think we even had one nurse that was like, she was just like, just give it a try, or not really give it a try, but like you miss that bond of like just them being held, you know? And so we almost, I just remember like, I don't even know if I'm able to pick him up and hold him. I mean, he was connected to all these things, but anyway, so we go on this journey of, you know, feeding and all of that. And I remember the lady, she came in and, you know, I don't think she knew that we had been parents before or anything. And so she
was young. She wasn't very old.
No, this was the older lady first. And she just told me like, this is what it's going to look like. And she started giving us all the lessons and I'm just crying, truthfully. But it was more just like, again, it's not supposed to look this way. I think I was always challenging. This is not the way it's supposed to look. So we do that and she teaches us those things and we go through that process and he doesn't do very good. So that was very discouraging that he could handle like an ounce, but their hope in order for him to get out, he had to take a full bottle. And so he wasn't doing it well. I mean, he just would lay there, you know, so he wasn't responding the way that I was just wanting them to see that he could do it, you know? And so the reality of what they were telling me, I was seeing it happen before my eyes. Like, man, like from the outside, everything looks okay, but they're telling me the inside of him is what's damaged, what's broken. And I'm starting to see what they're seeing. And so it was a moment of reality, but also like, you know, man, this is where we are. So that particular day, we're back and forth, but I remember we went home that night and the person changed to this younger girl. And before they had told us to get there at a certain time, before we had even arrived, he had some episodes of aspiration, or what's it called?
I think that's right.
Aspirating. Yeah. They had to feed him, you know, throughout the night and he did not do well. Like he was aspirating, which, was really scary, but basically she made the call. We're going to do a suck and swallow study. We're going to have to change his feedings to thickened feedings. He no longer can take your pumped milk. He's going to have to go on formula. And she made all those decisions before we even arrived. And that was one of the lowest days for myself. And I know for him, it was like, oh my gosh, like there's like no sign of when we're going to leave, but there's also no sign of him getting better. It had been several days since the MRI and we were just feeling that, you know, and though he was getting things removed from him, tubes and stuff removed from him, the reality of his development really wasn't where we were believing for. So they did all of that and they came back and it was not good results. He asked he had all of those things going on. And so they made the decision to change up what he was eating and how that would happen, and that they would do some bottle feeding and some feeding tube. And there was a room that I was in. It was next to where Jacob stayed those first few nights. That was like a pump room where you had privacy and there was different stalls. And that became like my prayer moment because I was doing it all the time and spending a lot of time alone. And it was the times where I would probably even look up the encouragement people were sending and words people were giving. And it was like just life to me. And I remember talking to the Lord about what do I do? Like the very thing I still felt control or power over, which was, you know, pumping and giving it to him. I felt like somehow a part of me was helping him, had been taken away. Yeah. And there was just that idea that like whatever control I think I have, I really have none, that I'm going to have to continually just trust. And I'm going to, but this is hard. And it was cool because after all of that, I went back into the lobby. We were talking, and somebody, that was a Wednesday night service, and they, through this process, had written a song, Until the Miracle Comes, and they had done that song at church. And so this lady sent me this encouraging word, and she just said, Hannah, I saw you in full armor with a sword in your hand and Urias in your hand. And then I saw you have to lay it all down, and even him down. And she had no idea of what that day had held, or that, because we hadn't updated anybody, or what that had looked like. But that's how I felt. It's like I had battled, and I was still in that position of like fighting. But in some ways I had to like let it all go and almost disarm myself from what could happen, or sorry, what it should look like, and trust God. And so we did that, and he had to stay on that for a while, throughout the process of being there. And I think part of it was the first lady we had, she was so tender and kind and almost grandma-like. And this other lady was just like cold and just a matter of fact. And I think my mom heart was just like, that's not the way it has to be, you know? So wrestled those things out, and, you know, we would see little victories, but overall his way of how he was engaging with us was not what you wanted to see. I think the kids got to come at some point.
Well,
and hold him.
About 2 weeks in, so it's day 14, 15, something like that. The nurse that was there the night that woke me up, she was not on rotation a lot, apparently.
So she wasn't there a lot.
She wasn't there a lot.
So
but one of the times, about 2 weeks in, she comes, and she didn't even pull me aside. She pulls her aside. And she just said, like, let me tell you this. I've been waiting to tell y'all because I wanted to see what was resulting. Because we would get a cup, like the average person, the average medical professional, so nurse, doctor, were like, things seem okay, we're still watching. Things seem okay, we're watching. And then a couple, we'd get like,
this is really
like
good.
One neonatologist is only there like once every 7 days for one like shift or something like that. She just fills in or whatever. And she came in. It's like, girl, I'm telling you, y'all, whatever y'all are doing, keep doing it. This kid's doing great. And so like we get encouraged. And then a nurse would be like, nope, we're not seeing this and we're not seeing that. And it's just like,
up, down, up,
and
down.
So we're getting
and in that process too, they actually had someone come in that she was like the grief doctor. And so she talked to us through all of this, but it was her that actually was positive about what she was seeing. I was like, well, when you compare everything to that, I guess we were in a good place.
And there was this other Indian doctor that she was the lady.
That's right.
She was the lady who was the doctor who
received
him.
First one. Yeah.
So she came in one day and it's like, I heard you guys singing and praying, and I'm telling you, what y'all are doing, it's making a difference. Best thing we can do is get that kid home and spend time with his siblings. He's going to be okay. Like things like that. We would get some encouragement, and then we'd get we were
hearing positive reports of even the NICU, like less babies were coming in and more babies that were
that's what we started praying.
Yeah,
like as long as we're here, we're going to see other people get victory. So we were watching people leave, you know, with healthy babies, or at least their journey was over there. So that was encouraging. We were being uplifted by those things. So a couple weeks in, the nurse, her name's Latricia, she pulled Hannah aside, and you probably can quote the story. We have her perspective on video, and I'm getting it secondhand. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. Basically she said that night that Jacob came in and spoke to those seizures and told them to go. When he left the room, she said, I looked at those monitors and everything started to change. But she said, every hair on my body stood up. I knew the presence of God was in that space, touching and healing him. And she even began saying how she did not have quite a belief in God, and that she had experienced things in her life that she had never experienced God that way. But she knew that he was in the room with her that night, I think was kind of the gist of what she was saying. And she says that in that moment is when
she knew things
monitors started changing, and she was watching it happen. But she said there was a presence with me that I had never felt before. And we've stayed in touch since his story. And she has testified of just that moment changing her life to where she had to walk through some medical things since.
Life-threatening.
Yeah.
Things that could have killed her.
Yeah. And she would recall that and say, God, you were with me there and you're going to be with me there. So that was really cool. And I looked at her, I was like, why didn't you tell us this? Because I think this was the day after.
We are so hungry for any scrap of encouragement.
Oh my gosh.
Positivity.
And of course it didn't mean like everything was better, but it was like, wow, that's awesome. And,
well, it builds your faith when you hear something like that.
It does. So.
I think she had, because she didn't have a great experience with faith. She was trepid to tell us.
Absolutely.
Like, is what I'm experiencing a fluke? Is it really real? And so it's like it's almost like I think she was waiting to see some good results to see that like what she felt was true.
Yeah, which is probably
and I'll
best.
say, like, I felt nothing that night. It's sorrowful and making myself be positive and believe. I didn't feel anything. I had no sense of the presence of the Lord that night. And it's not like I believe the Lord's presence, but like in a felt sense. Not at all. Not at all. I didn't feel any power in my prayer. Nothing. But it was there, and she recognized it, and so we were getting some good signs there. And so it was just kind of a up and down. And finally, they let us go on day 20.
And so he, I guess, had met certain benchmarks to where it was safe for you guys to take him home. And
before he left, he had to. He was off of one of his seizure medicines because he started on 2, and then he was the feeding tube was out. He was taking the bottle, but it was certain ways. Like we had to mix certain stuff with it. It could only be this much. So it was very specific. He was on a very strong schedule where typically with a newborn, you make that schedule with him. We had that.
And the seizure medicine, it's not that he had more seizures, because he actually did not have another seizure after that night.
But once you're on it, you have to be.
But the way that medicine works is if you wean yourself off too quick, it'll cause seizures.
Right.
So he had a very, very long schedule of tapering him off. It was a
6-month process of tapering him off that medicine.
Wow. It was January or February?
February 8th.
February
2009.
He was born August 31st, and it was February before we could get him completely off. That was the other threshold I'm looking at. Like, I'm not going to fight him, but this is ridiculous.
Like a recurring theme in this is like, man, you're in the middle of a battle, and you're just looking for some sort of like resolution. Like where's this going to end? Yeah. And then as soon as you get to a point, then it's like, oh, we've got even more. Yeah. And then there's more, and then there's more.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we're here 5 years later. You know, even recounting this story, and looking back, I mean, I can see you guys reliving it even in your eyes and in your emotions, like that constant back and forth of hope and then disappointment and then more hope and then disappointment and like endurance through that whole season. Man, I'm recalling even, my little memories of the story. I'm not in the middle of it with y'all, but as, as a family member, as somebody like, I just recall a sense even in the church of like, hey, we don't know everything that's going on, but we know that we know that God's good. Yeah. We know what his will is in this situation. Yeah. We're seeing signs of hope in the middle of this. Maybe we don't know all the details and all the ups and downs, but we're going to do what you guys have heard. Like we're going to trust God, only believe. We're going to do those things, and we're going to rally around you as best we can. Yeah. And, as you're coming to the part of the story where you get to take him home and knowing that there's still battles to come and there's still things that you're going to have to face. What did it feel like to at least be able to leave that place?
One of the last things that the original doctor that cared for him, what she started saying in those last few days, because she would come and she would see Emma, because Emma would be up there with us some. And she would say, one of the best things for this kid is going to be getting home and being with his siblings. And, she didn't maybe even know how much that was giving hope to me, that there was a certain point they could take him up to in the NICU. But there was a road that we were going to embark on as a family that would be healing to him as well. Yeah. And I think that was just the anticipation of my heart is, Lord, like we are seeing all the things that are in momentum of what we've been believing for. But man, I can't wait to see when you put him in his environment, when you put him with the people. And it was cool because in his pregnancy, I would have a couple people just share this dynamic of him with them was going to be a great strength. So it was just kind of even confirming some things that people had said. But I had this hope that somehow some of the storm was past us. And as we got into it, we were having to change some things. There was plenty of things that did not look normal. I mean, we had a 2-story home and everybody moved downstairs for like six months because, I couldn't go up the stairs and everybody wanted to hold them, all of those things that you do when a new baby comes home. But that was like kind of on my mind is let's just get home and let's just like put them in the environment that we're going to cultivate and let's see.
Yeah. The battle environment is just different when you're in the NICU. It's almost like, I don't know who's on my side and who's not believing with me. Now, everybody is for us in the sense of like they want the baby healthy.
Yeah.
But they're also, we don't know how many are believers. And this is a stronghold of death. Like sickness and disease reign
or infirmities,
here. Infirmities reign here. And we are insurgents in this, but I don't know who's my ally and who believe with me or who's only looking in the flesh. And so it's like, are you in the battle with me or do I need to be a witness to you? And so like that constant feeling and being in battle every day and every person, there was a sense of not resting from the battle, but like we get to control the conditions of the battle a little bit differently, not being here. This is a major threshold that we get to cross. And not be stuck here because he literally is not allowed to leave this room. And now we
get to take him home with me was super exciting and didn't have to sleep in a different place, but we're together, you know. But there was fears too. Yeah, I had a lot of things.
I know we've been recording for a while, and I don't want to rush too quickly to resolution, but to kind of bring us to the completion of the story. I know we need to there's that 1 year mark. As is kind of like a big milestone for you guys. Go kind of to hit some of those high and low points like leading up to that.
Yeah. They're a lot more sporadic and not as consistent day by day.
Yeah.
There was after we got home, the next time we went to see his pediatrician was a kind of an odd and then good kind of moment, which we were all there for. I committed. I don't normally go to all these pediatrician appointments, but I committed with him with Urias. I'll be at all of them until you say we're good.
Yeah, so we went to the pediatrician that was the pediatrician for all of our kids, and they did their normal stuff. I think he was 6 weeks or so. No, 1 month. Whenever we went, and
so we're 10-ish days back from the hospital.
Yeah, and it's so funny because she looked at me and she's like, "Had I not known what he went through, I would tell you he's a perfect baby." And man, I held on to those words because what she could assess in the moment was that he was doing all the things that he should do, and so that was super encouraging. But I know
his scores.
Yes, but we were told that day, you're going to receive these letters from the state of Texas in your mail. Do not read them because his APGAR scores were all zeros. And that basically is not a good letter that you want to read.
Child.
Yeah, it talks about, and I think I had already read it. So it wasn't good. So anyway, that was really cool to feel like I had someone allying with us, that she wasn't being not careful or not attentive to what he had gone through, but she wasn't also trying to look for problems because of what he went through. That's what I felt in the moment, was it wasn't going to be somebody that just kept saying he's going to have this, he's going to have this.
Right.
I felt like she was more saying, this is a perfect baby and we're going to walk with you. And she made herself available, but she didn't have to treat him extra special, if you will,
Right.
And so that was exciting. And we had a few suck and swallow studies that he had to go through in those really close weeks right after coming home. And that was one of the first major celebrations, is all of that came back, that he had developed where he needed to be. And I feel like this was probably further from coming home than I'm remembering it. But basically, we could take out the thickener from his bottles.
Yeah.
And
we were looking for
he got into
any forward progress.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember for me, the determination was, He will be fully
There
healthy,
you go.
fully healed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long it's going to take for them to see it. And so every time we would have an appointment, it's like, is this the moment they're going to see it?
Right.
And that was where we had to fight a lot of discouragement and disappointment is sometimes it'd be like, I see good things, but you got this, this, and this.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, then we're not done with that yet. We're going to push through that.
Right.
We go to the developmental nurse because he's developmentally needing to work on things. And it's like, we'd see a lot of good. And then there's that like, but you got to do this, this, and this. And so it's like, okay, they're going to see it. We're not done yet. This might be the journey, but they're going to see it. We'd go to the neurologist, and that is a very difficult place to be because every kid that goes there has it's not minor. These are major things that these kids are dealing with. And these poor parents that are, with these kids, I feel for them because you don't know how many are believers, and you just see this cold, like, I'm just trying to survive and do my best to love my kid, but this is exhausting. And so, like, we're sitting here in faith, believing, and then we see all these signs of bad, and the neurologist would be somewhat hopeful, but very honest. The original MRI, he would base a lot of things on the original MRI. I still see this. It's still potentially cerebral palsy, and then he'll move his arms. Hey, those are a little more flexible than I thought it would be. I see good signs, but we need to pay attention to this, this, and this, and be on that medicine a little. And so it's like, okay, they're going to see it. They're going to see it. They're going to say it when he got off the medicine. We were relieved. Take a test, and there's like, hey, it's enough to get off the medicine, but there's still some stuff here that we just need to pay attention to. Yeah. We're not going to do a full MRI yet. And I'm like, do a full MRI. I'm telling you, you're going to see good things. But he's like, we're not going to do that. We're going to wait until he's a year. And we're just like, okay. So that was what a lot of that year was, is it wasn't every day we're fighting something, but it was continually, nope, we're going to only believe. We're going to trust. We see good signs. They're going to see it too. They're going to tell us whatever they tell us. We're going to be kind and gracious, but we're not going to accept that as his final.
Well, I think that is incredibly helpful for other people who may be facing some sort of long-term fight with whatever it is. Maybe it's an illness, maybe it's a traumatic situation, whatever it is. But to know that not every situation is resolved in an instant, and that walking through that process is a lot of not being moved by what you see, but remembering what the truth is, even in the middle of those moments, and then standing on those things and the little victories, celebrating those along the way, and finding places of those little places where you can anchor your faith. And so
the little testimonies that give you the power to overcome.
And I feel like God is faithful to give you guys those things when you needed it, and to surround you with people that would build you up and encourage you, because obviously this is a long journey. And I think a lot of people would like for the story to go a certain way. It's like, and then we prayed, and then he was fine, and then we went home. The end. But that's not.
And everything in me wishes it was that way, but it wasn't. It just took a fierce determination that we're not gonna rest. How do I say this? We're not gonna accept anything that isn't the truth, but we're also going to be in through the process until they see what is true. Until we see what is true come fully to pass.
That's good. That's good.
So then at the year mark was when we had to go to the neurologist kind of soon, and then it was a big gap, and like we knew that's the next threshold, and it was a long wait because he wanted to get him a full year. And the second to last one had good news. He's like, I see a lot of good things. You don't have to see me a lot, but we're going to look. And I mean, because he still has his charts and he still opens the charts. It's like, I see good things, but we're going to look at this and we got to see this. And these are the things I'm seeing. I don't see any seizures. So that's a good sign, but we're going to have to look. And so it was like just a wait and get him around his siblings as much as possible and play as much as possible, get through the whole year. And then finally at a year, or roughly a year, it might have been a little sooner than a year. I don't have that clear memory. I just remember it was around him turning 1. We did the full MRI again. And he looked at it, and after that, he just came to us and goes, whatever I see, it's not anything wrong. Like, he seems fine. Everything I'm seeing, is fantastic. And I told you there was a few outliers, and I only have maybe one other case where someone had a full recovery from something this extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And your kid's one of them.
Wow.
He's just fine. I'd like to see him before or like around kindergarten, but whatever. This is great. And so, and it almost was like, it wasn't as much of a relief as I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we saw this that first day.
Yeah.
So now it's like, okay, it happened.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing. I expected this like rush of relief. But it's like, I don't know. It just came to pass. It's like, this is what we prayed for. Great. Yeah. And that was a good celebration to put out for everybody that like, he's got a clean bill of health and he's a normal kid. So this is great. Thank you. And it just, that's power of prayer, but it's also a lot of persistence.
Yeah.
We had to persevere through a lot, and it would have been easy to give up and get tired and just go like, or accept partial victory. And we were just determined like, no, we said only believe. We're not going to accept halfway. Okay. So he's got a developmental nurse appointment. We'll get through it. Well, he'll be fine. They will see it. It might not be as soon as we thought, but her word, be patient in the process. Watch me get the glory.
Yeah.
Whatever. We don't know how long this process is. We wish it was like a week, maybe a month, but we're in it for a year, and it's okay. We're going to be okay. We're going to keep trusting. We're going to keep believing, and I'm just not going to accept anything less than God's perfect will.
Yeah. So that first birthday, that was a big celebration.
That was.
Was that whenever we went to we had like a pool party
Yep.
and stuff? Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah.
I remember feeling just
Like
just
you could-
joy with you guys.
You could breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a
So
big day.
obviously, he just recently turned 5.
Mm-hmm.
He's in kindergarten, and you guys got a handful.
My goodness.
The boy got an extra dose of life, you
There
might
you
say.
go.
We tell people their prayers worked double time.
There you go.
I mean, he's got
That's
double
okay.
the amount of life that all of our kids have.
So what do you now as a mom and dad, we've had this, you've gone through this traumatic journey, but now like your imagination is set towards his future.
Yeah.
And when you guys look at him and you imagine, it's not like a hope that you're clinging to, but it's like, it's a reality that you're looking into. Like what do you guys see for that boy in the future?
He's our most athletic child.
Mm.
And in a weird, almost ironic kind of way, he took to basketball earlier than all of our other kids. He loves to play basketball and shoot his basketball goal, and actually has a really good shot.
And riding a bike.
He
He's
taught
the only
himself,
one that taught himself.
He taught himself how to ride a bike. He got so tired of seeing his sister ride a bike, and he couldn't.
Without training wheels. Not
Wow.
with
He
them.
never had training wheels.
Wow.
Like we got him a bike that has no pedals, so you just kind of push
Balance
yourself
bike.
and balance bike.
Yep.
He took to it, did it wonderfully, and immediately got a bike upgrade. Like
Wow.
no training wheels. Every one of our other kids had training wheels, and we had to work through it.
Yep.
He never had to. So I say he's extroverted, and I think that's mostly true because he's constantly clinging to like where his siblings are. He wants to know where everybody's at. I don't know. It hasn't translated into like public environments. Like he's not a performer. Like, please come, everybody look at me. But he definitely is the one that clings to relationship. He does not really enjoy alone time very much. And so he's our most extroverted kid. But he's doing well in kindergarten. I was like, I'm to the point where like, I don't even have much of a concern of him. Like I keep thinking like, I don't know if this kid can be killed. Like the death tried, but like when he gets sicker, he does something dangerous.
Right.
I don't think anything of it.
Yep.
Like this kid's invincible. So, but he just, I know he just, his face like has a joy, like just life to it. That whatever he does, he's going to bring life to it.
He's got a smile that lights up the room. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Urias means God is my light, and so what I see in his future, and he brings light wherever he goes, and I mean, he is still a 5-year-old that we have to parent and discipline and
I'm
train.
probably harder on
He
him than
is.
any of
I'm
my
like,
other
sometimes
kids.
I'm like, don't you remember? You know,
I
like,
do remember, but
give
like,
him
I'm
some
not,
mercy.
I prayed you back to life, boy. You better straighten up.
Yeah. So, I mean, he receives all of the same in that way of like, he has to be taught and trained and all of those things. I think that I don't know. I look at him and I think of just the gratitude and the thankfulness for those that chose to engage in the battle together. I have said this before, but I will spend my whole life saying thank you, because everybody had to choose to do that. That wasn't something we required or mandated, but people felt that in that moment, and I know that made a difference. And so. I don't know what it's going to be like when I look at him one day and tell him the story. That'll be a different milestone.
Yeah, he's still not old enough to really know or comprehend what he went through.
Not at all. And recently he had to get his tonsils removed. And I was just going to say that since the 1-year mark of receiving those things, I think that we've had to process through. And so even when you walk through those hard things, like the process after the fact of the reality of what you walk through, it has a way of you have to be delivered from fear, But anyway, recently went through tonsil surgery and all of that went well, but I could feel certain things try to remind me of what had happened, and God was just faithful. And in the small things and the major things, like he always provides something that just tells you it's going to be okay. And even when it doesn't feel okay or your reality is it's not okay, he's going to still walk with you. So, with Urias, when I look at him, I'm just thankful. I mean, he keeps me on my toes. He makes me probably the most tired of all of the kids put together. So I nurture gratitude and all of those things. But man, I don't know fully what it's going to look like, but I'm hopeful as to that somehow some of those experiences of just real tangible moments with the Lord, he'll know of those things. And that he'll walk with the Lord in a unique and powerful way for his generation and what that's going to need.
Yeah.
We're all generational carriers for the time that God places us here. And so I just sense that with him, that there's going to be a connection he shares that's not better than or anything like that. But because of what our stories do to us and what opportunities come from the stories that we've all walked through, God will be real to him in a really neat and unique way. So that's what I see.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll probably bawl at his graduations and probably wedding, because those are the images I nurtured the most.
Yeah.
I specifically remember when you were in the hospital in Durant. I remember telling you, and I remember picturing like I could picture in my mind you getting onto him because he's being a toot to his siblings.
I do remember that.
And that
happens all the time.
And he is a toot
to his siblings.
he can be, but that's what the baby does.
Exactly. They like the pester.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand it till having a baby of the family. I'm like, why do you poke everybody, especially the oldest one. He just knows how to push her buttons. So anyway,
but it's just so obviously at the end of the story, there's so much to be thankful for, so much to celebrate.
Yeah.
And our hope, even in sharing and capturing this story, is to provide hope for anybody else who may be going through something tough and dark. And so take heart in whatever that situation is. Be reminded of the goodness of God, and hold on to those truths, and be patient in the process. Right?
Absolutely.
So, that will bring us to the end of this episode. I'm actually not sure which camera I should be looking at this point, but we just want to say thank you for being a part of this, listening to this. If this blessed you, let us know. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, and share, and we will see you guys on the next one.